So I can get a screen. Thank you.
Hey everybody, this is Frederick and Gina Watts, and this is Love in 60 Seconds.
Hey everybody. Giving you time to get on today. We had a long day today, but it was kind of a chill day. I had to work today, but it was a chill day today.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Today is August 13th, is Monday, and
It's good.
we appreciate you guys tuning in. Hey, Sister Francis, how are you? Appreciate you joining us this evening.
The wonderful and talented Deborah Francis.
Yes.
And the amazing cook, Deborah Francis.
Oh, man. Jerk chicken was amazing.
Yep, so we had a great time yesterday with family. Just kind of hung out and chilled out yesterday, and everything was good. Everything was good. Hey there, James Price is with us today.
Yeah.
I know why we having issues on my Instagram, but it's okay.
We're gonna get into our topic tonight. We actually started a series, basically talking about being a good shepherd in your marriage, or another subtopic would be probably how to lead and how to follow, and what's important. So we're going to continue that tonight, get right in it, talk about some things, and hopefully it'll bless you. And we do thank you guys for tuning in, and we appreciate your support.
Yep.
So, always continue to follow us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, like and love our pages. Let us know that what you want to talk about and what you want to hear. We do appreciate you guys when you send in those encouraging chats and encouraging DMs and encouraging messages, and we appreciate you guys. So,
Yeah.
you want to start off, or?
Well, certainly our prayer is that we want to make sure that everybody, I don't know what's going on with my connection, but I'll try something a little different on that. But we want to make sure that we are sharing, from our hearts, and sharing, what we feel like God has given us to share. 21 years of marriage, and 22. Will it be 22? It'll be 22 years of marriage in February, right? Mm-hmm. 22 years of marriage. I know he married me when I was a child because I'm so young. Anyway, we want to share these things to help build your marriage and to build your relationships. These are tools to help you to get to where you need to be. Hey there, tools to where you need to get to where you need to be and want to be in your relationships. God's desire for us and our desire for you is to have a happy relationship, to have happy relationships all across the board. So the tools that we give you, even though they're kind of designed for marriage, but they can be for your children, for your siblings, for your parents. A lot of these tools can be used well, and if you're not practicing these tools, then they're not going to help you. But you got to really study to show yourself approved. So you really need to practice what we're saying, and then kind of go from there.
Right, definitely. Tonight we're going to talk about how to lead, how to follow. If you missed last week, go back and look at part 1. Because tonight I'm going to talk to the husbands a little bit about what is important and how to lead in your marriage. So if you were watching this with your spouse, that's great. If not, if your spouse is home, you guys sit down and let's watch this and let's chat with this together. Definitely give us some hearts and likes if you're on Facebook or Instagram. Hey Mike, how you doing, brother? And just text us. We want to engage with you tonight, but I want to talk to the men about how to keep your spouse's heart full, because that's very important in establishing a good marital relationship. You definitely need to understand, what it takes as a man to keep your wife's heart full. And then even as a woman, what it takes to keep your husband's heart full. Yep. But I'm going to talk to the men, I get a little bit, and my wife, I guess, will talk to the woman. It's definitely a calling. It's definitely something that, like we said last time, if it doesn't scare you, if it doesn't intimidate you, then you don't really understand the depth of it. Right. But it's definitely something that God intends for the marriage to be integral and for it to work perfectly. And it's very important that man sets that tone in keeping the spouse's heart full, because if you're able to capture her heart and keep her heart as a woman, and she will be able to open up. And that's in trust, that's in intimacy, and that's in all levels of relationship.
Absolutely. I mean, I agree. I'm not, I'm not gonna chime in too much tonight, but because it's the, kind of like the man's manual, but it's good for the woman to know. But for women, yes, all of those things do help us have that type of response. I tell my husband all the time that, thank you, that his temperament, it's the thermostat in the house. How he acts, it definitely influences how I act.
Definitely.
So, we want to, men, you make sure that, your tone, that you're managing your heart and your relationships, your persona, you're managing it the way that you need to be managing it, because it will affect how everybody else is acting in the house.
And marriage, and even if maybe some of our single friends are watching tonight, marriage in essence, the way God created is wonderful. It's a great thing to be in.
Yeah.
My spouse is wonderful. I love her to death. But the chores of life, and even going through the daily routines can be daunting sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's waking up early, going to bed late, commuting back and forth to work, children, having kids, doing laundry, making meals, all those things, going to play dates. What are some other daunting tasks? Birthday parties.
Yeah, whatever you gotta do. If you're a person that does a lot at church or ministry like myself,
ministry.
It's a lot of stuff.
And sometimes those can be distractions in marriage, because it distracts you sometimes. So what you need, or what your spouse may need, and it's not necessarily something that you do intentionally as men, but it's definitely something that can be distracting. So you have to make time to make your spouse feel loved. You have to make time to pay attention to your spouse.
So, give an example of what that looks like.
Well, an example is that when, no matter if you have a busy day, and maybe not every time you can go on a date night, or maybe not every time you can, do something special, but a lot of times, even as men, our husbands, when a wife sometimes just asks you, hey, how was your day? And especially if she's at home or she's had a busy day herself, that is her way of opening up. And a lot of times, we talked about this before about communication. A lot of times men say, oh, fine. Or what did you do today? I get that question. How was your day? Oh, it was okay. Well, no, that's your time to communicate. Right. That's your time to open up. And because a woman needs that, when you're asking me that, right, it's not really, you do care about my day, but you're looking for something more. You're looking for a connection.
Absolutely. Right? We're looking for the connection. That's exactly the word I was about to use. Because women, we need that connection. We need to feel that value. We need to feel that attention. And not that we just attention seeking, because I'm by nature just not one of those kind of people. I don't have to have attention, because I command attention on a daily basis, and not saying I'm fabulous or anything. That's just my personality. That's just who God made me. So I'm okay with that. And I'm okay with sitting back in the shadows. I'm okay with directing. I'm okay with being, doing things in the background. But so I'm not like starving for attention, but I do want attention from my spouse. And I do want that intimate attention. Like sometimes I was like, I'll be like, do you love me? And he'll be like, yes. And I'll be like, do you really? And you're like, why are you asking me a second time? I love you. Right. And I'm like, but sometimes you want that looking into the face, baby, I really love you. I appreciate everything you do. That kind of, you want that real engagement. So yeah, that really helps when you're giving that engagement, that real eye to eye. Thank you for the hearts. I like the hearts. Yeah. But that real eye to eye engagement, because that makes you feel valuable, and that makes you feel paid attention to, and that gives us strength. That gives a woman and a man, but it fuels and gives you strength.
It does. And then men, before you can lead, and before you can lead in marriage, you need to make sure one aspect of being a good leader is finding time for your spouse.
Yes.
You have to make time, even if you have to stay up a little bit later, even if you have to go above and beyond and bring home some flowers, do the dishes, take a walk in the park, do whatever it is. You have to find time for your spouse, especially when you get into the double digits, double digit anniversaries. And, we're talking about once you hit 10 years and above.
Or even really like that 7 year. They say that, call it that 7 year itch, where you've been in the 7 years and you're just like, oh, okay, now, you got to really make sure that you're switching things up, that you're really engaging, especially if you're busy people, you got busy jobs, busy lives. Again, we talked, he mentioned about, having all of those daunting tasks. Your day, I feel like my life is full of daunting tasks sometimes, but he does a great job at making me feel like I can handle those tasks, and he gets me away enough that I can kind of relax and I can take a breath from those tasks, but then I have to get right back in it. Definitely.
So, definitely. And keep hitting those hearts and likes. Let us know if you're enjoying this tonight, because men, you really need to worry or concern yourself with keeping your wife's heart tender towards you, because if you're able to keep her heart tender, it's going to make your relationship so much better. It's going to help you. And even in all types of relationships, whether it's your children, a lot of times I've seen a quote before that men, or that a marriage should be so wonderful that you present to your children that they can't wait to do it. And a lot of times when we get to situations in our lives, sometimes we don't really treat our children in the way that we should show tenderness and kindness to. Right. So even you want to show those in the household, show tenderness and kindness. And the way you do that, and a nugget is, you have to lead with love. You have to lead with grace.
Absolutely.
That's how you get tenderness. You have to draw her in. I can get intimacy. I can get things out of her if I draw her in with tenderness. And the way you draw your wife in with tenderness is really to be humble. Would you agree?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And with humbleness comes kindness, but it's also confidence. It's not weakness to show tenderness to your wife, because that's what she needs more. Because when you show tenderness and when you show kindness to your spouse, when you show those efforts, those qualities to your wife especially, it dispels any anxiety or fears that she may have during the day that you don't even know about.
That's right.
Especially if you go out to home to work, if you go out to home to do anything. Am I being truthful?
You are being so truthful,
It takes away the anxieties that she may have.
Absolutely. And just to chime in on that, when the husband is able to deliver that type of treatment to his spouse, it really helps because life can make it very easy for you to tune your spouse out. When you really can take them for granted, because they're there. You go to work, you go to wherever, you go to church or wherever you go in your school or wherever you're going, come back home, you eat dinner, you might eat them at different times, you might eat at the same time, and it's kind of routine. And I told you, routines are not 100% bad, but sometimes routines can get you in a funk. So you have all of that, and you can easily kind of get detached and not be really tuned in, not that, you lose that loving feeling, you know what I'm saying? You just like, you know what I'm saying? And like, if you serving your husband, or if you making him dinner or whatever, you just like, here's your food kind of thing. You know what I'm saying? Not saying, honey, is this good for you? You want something, you know what I'm saying? That it's easy to get that way. But husbands, if you are, and wives, it works both ways, if you are consistently showing appreciation, you consistently taking 1 second and grabbing her hand and looking her in the eye and saying, honey, I really love you. I appreciate you. Thank you for doing this. I know you got to be super tired. You work today. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? You work just like I worked. You know what I'm saying? Or I didn't work and you worked, or you didn't work all day, but you're doing all this stuff with the kids, or you were doing whatever it was that you were doing. Thank you for that. Yeah. And that appreciation, it goes so far. It goes really far. And that, not only that, if you're recovering from a time in your marriage where you had a tough time, right, or in your relationship where you have a tough time, there are so many enemies and adversaries fighting your spouse's mind throughout that day. Right. And if you're healing from that, there's so many adversaries. There's so many things that are fighting, your wife's mind, your husband's mind. And if you are engaging with them when they come home, and you're engaging with them when they get back into it, you are helping to fight those battles for them. Yeah.
And that kind of love puts confidence back.
Absolutely.
And pours back into
absolutely.
Because
and trust,
because a woman looks for a safe place, And as a man, you're supposed to be a protector and a provider for her.
That's
and
right.
so when you are speaking those words into her, you're building a safe place. And especially, when your marriage has some issues, if you're dealing with what arguments, financial issues, infidelity, all those things. We were sharing with a friend, even last night, or before I even, well, I'll say that was that, when dealing with certain issues in their marriage, when the foundation is broken, you have to repair it.
You got to go all the way back
And
down.
you have to go all the way back to the beginning and build that foundation. So there's certain things that may have been acceptable before, but it just might not be acceptable now. Mm-hmm. So because of that, the husband needs to set the tone and reassuring the wife that, there's no anxiety and fear, that I got you. I'm your rock. I'm going to be solid. We're going to make mistakes, right? We're going to fall. We're going to do that, and we talked about that before. But like you said, we set the thermometer, we set the temperature. We are the thermometer, but the heat and cooling comes from the wife. You're either going to have a hot home, you're going to have a cold home, and you don't want to have a cold home with a cold wife.
That's right.
And so, men, you have to speak words and speak life into your wife, and you have to remind her that you value her.
Yes.
Daily, you have to, and there's really 4 things. You need to remind her, you need to confirm to her, you need to lavish her, or 3 things. Those 3 things. When you speak to remind her that you value, I appreciate you, I love you, I thank you for all the things that you do for me on a daily basis. My wife will sometimes, like at events or when we're just out, she'll make a plate for me. Don't have to do that, and each marriage is different. I tell her I appreciate that, and a lot of times be like, I'll make my own plate, and then I'll be crossing my fingers in the back, be like, I hope she say, don't, I'll make it for you, and she does, but I appreciate it. And then confirm. I tell her every day that you are beautiful, that you are just as beautiful as the day I first saw you. I'm confirming things in her to build her up, because when I lavish her with words, it nurtures her, it waters her, and any dryness that she may be feeling or an experience that I may have caused or may not have caused, that life may have caused in her heart, those words of kindness are nurturing, they're watering, they're doing all those things, and those drynesses and those experiences comes from day-to-day routines. And it goes back for a wife. This morning, I'll give you a quick example. Oh man, my best friend is on the line. Hey Glenn, how you doing? But this morning I got up and I was just cranky, just a little cranky.
Yes.
Was tired. I was cranky. But immediately, my wife didn't even know it. She just, rolled over and just was poured into just touching and wouldn't let me get in a cranky mood, just by her kindness and by her love. And that set the tone for me. And then we were able to pray together and do other stuff together and start our day. So those things, and it really for men, setting the tone to speak that into a woman, I think is, would you agree, is the foundation, is that foundation, and building those and filling in those cracks sometimes that life causes.
Absolutely. And I think, like you mentioned today, sometimes you have to, as a woman, you have to gently nudge, lead from behind. It's kind of like, turn the bike this way.
Right.
You got to lead from behind and say, hey, do something like this morning. Like I said, I was just talking to him and I kind of sensed that he wasn't like, his maybe normal jovial self. Right. And but I just started, just talking to him, and I played some worship music and stuff like that this morning. And, just not doing it like, you need to listen to some worship music because you got to stank attitude. Nothing like that. Just like, oh, you know what? And I just started worshiping, myself. And sometimes when you have a tenderness in your heart, when you have a tenderness in your heart and you can reach out to your spouse, that will help them to be more tender, because they'll look at you and they will kind of reflect, and then bringing the presence of God in always helps. Right. So that was, again, able to help us to pray. But I wanted you to give an example of what it looks like when you are trying to rebuild that foundation.
Give an example.
Yeah.
That's not in our notes. That wasn't what we talked about. Give an example. All right.
So just whatever scenario and how you go back to rebuild that foundation. You're talking about pouring words, and you don't have to be a words person, because some people are not necessarily, hey, Miss Bridget, some people are not necessarily always word people. You got to be telling them all the time that they're beautiful, fabulous, and great. But everybody, because the Bible says death and life are in the power of the tongue. Right. And those that live by, what I'm saying, it's going to bless you regardless if you're a word person or not, or it can curse you if you're a word person or not.
Well, one example is that, just like I said, life makes you dry sometimes. Mm-hmm. And for men, when a woman, my wife, takes care of the home, and she also works, and mm-hmm. I travel a lot. So just one time you were going like, man, I'm having a long day. I'm having just been rough or whatever, blah, blah, blah. And now normally I don't do a lot of cooking, and I'm not that great of a cook. But I took it upon me to make sure, with a little nudging, that I made sure that the last thing that you had to worry about was dinner. Yeah. And taking care of the two men in the house, me and our son. Something that I don't normally do all the time, but it was something that it needed to build you up.
Yes.
And it was something that was, maybe in your relationship is not menial or not small at all, but in our relationship at that time, it was big. Yeah. Because it was something that she needed. It was something that you desired. But it was also an effort of me stepping out, even like our bishop preached, stepping out of your comfort zone, doing something to show an effort to appreciate your spouse.
Absolutely. And for me, I'm an acts of service person. So for me, that act of service went so far. Hey, that, my sister, that was acts of service went really far. It went really far because, to help me to do that, for me not to have to worry about that, about what you guys were going to eat, and you're able to go and get something for all of us to eat, man, that that could last me for like a year, because that's always my responsibility. That's what I do. But that helped me, and that does, acts like that do help go back to rebuild the foundation. But I was talking about too, also, like, if you have something that has transpired in your marriage or in your relationship, and you need to have a place where you can go back and rebuild, to go back to the basics, go back to where you first began that relationship, and start over in some things. Sometimes people, have something happen in their marriage, whether it's, they had some financial crisis with loved ones, with a child, infidelity, all these different kinds of things that you may have had an issue with. If you don't go back all the way down to the foundation of it, it's like trying to build a house on a broken foundation. Right. It may look great on the outside, but let something come. Let the ground shake just a little bit. That ground starts shaking, that house is going to fall. Right. It's like building a house on sand.
Yeah. And that goes back when we talked about, especially when you talk about infidelity, which is something that happens a lot in marriage, unfortunately. But you talk about the offender and the person being offended, the offendee. If you're the offender in any type of action, whether it is whatever you have done, you have got to take your spouse's heart into consideration. And for men, we're talking about men, the only way that you can be, if you have offended your wife and done something wrong, is to humble yourself.
Yes.
You have to have humility.
Yes.
You have to be able to say, I'm sorry. And then sometimes you have to, and not sometimes, all the time,
be sorry. Be truly.
Not only say you're sorry, but be sorry, but then take the efforts to correct the situation. To heal it. And with that, after humility comes patience, because you can't expect that person that is dealing with that brokenness or hurt just to throw it all away. They may love you and they may forgive you, but there's going to be days when it reoccurs or something triggers a thought or action. So you have to have patience to be like, you know what, I'm going to serve. I'm going to fill in that crack. I'm going to fill in this foundation for as long as it takes. That sign of humility and that sign of humbleness goes way farther than any words that you can say. I posted today on Instagram and Facebook, I don't know if you guys watched it or saw it, but what marriage is, what I thought marriage was. And I said, in marriage, love is the reason for a reason why you're married, but lifelong friendship is the gift of marriage. Right. And then kindness is the cause of marriage. Right. And then forever, or till death do you part, is the journey, or is the length. So we're here for the long run. but the kindness that we share is the cause or the foundation of why we're married. The best gift that you can give me is you being my best friend for as long as we're on this earth breathing. Absolutely. And I mean that. And her, the reason that I married you is because I love you. Mm-hmm. And if men, you can take those foundations and pour that back into your wife, she's already naming, like, say that again, boy.
I did not. I was just trying to touch you.
No,
I was just touching you.
And the reason why is because you still have to, men, we say, a lot of times when you talk about your vows, about why submits to your husband, we covered this last week. But when you think about how the shepherd is to us, which is Christ, being a good shepherd, we need to shepherd our wives. Doesn't mean our wives are sheep. It doesn't mean that they cannot lead, because they lead all the time in different areas. But the Bible says, and even so husbands should, that are morally obligated to love their own wives as being a sense in their own body. He who loves his own wife loves himself. And this Message Bible that we just started reading, and that's Ephesians 5:25. It says, husbands, go all out in your love for your wives.
Wow.
And I think that's me. I mean, cool. All out. When I was playing football, I went all out. When I was, as a musician, you try to practice and go all out. Husbands, go all out for your wives in marriage.
Absolutely. And I think that each person in the marriage, each person in the relationship, like even today, if you have a significant other, or if this is for married people or for those that are in a relationship. Yes, we love you too, Jana. But even if you're in a relationship today, before you go to bed tonight, if you got to text them or if you got to call them, if if your spouse is not with you, and if your spouse is with you, go to them, hold their hands. It may be awkward because you ain't done it in a long time, but go to them and say, you know what, I appreciate you, or say something great about them. Man, you know what, I love holding your arms. Like sometimes I like my husband's arms. I'll be like, oh gosh, your arms, they're so firm, exactly. And it's exactly what he does. You know what I'm saying? Putting that arm up. But, say something kind, say something meaningful, say something loving, pour water and oil, back onto your relationship. If you haven't done it today, do it. You know what I'm saying? Take a moment to do it. And don't be just like, you so sweet, girl, you fat. No, look her in the face.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Look him in the face. Honey, you are the strength. You're the rock of this house. And baby, I couldn't do it without you. You keep me together. You keep us together. Tell him, let him know, and if that's not even the case, speak those things that are not as though they were.
Right.
What you want it to be.
Because a good marriage includes, I guess, like 2 P's. Practice and patience. Yeah. I mean, I didn't always know how to do that. I didn't come from a home that had a mom and dad, so I didn't see a good example of marriage in the home. So a lot of times these things that I'm learning, I had to practice. I haven't always been a great communicator, and there's still a lot more communication upcoming that I can do. But it's something that I now practice, that I've learned to practice. And then wives or spouses, if your spouse is not that type of person in a certain area, the other P is patience. If as a man is led by God, and God will speak to him. Like I said before, having faith is in marriage is sometimes allowing that husband to believe that the word that God has for him, that God will work and do for him. So a lot of times you have to have patience to let God work in your husband. And so you can't be nagging and pushing and trying to demean his manhood, because you'll never get the result that you want from it. But men, you have to practice all those things that we said before. Humility. You have to practice kindness. You have to practice tenderness. You have to practice those things and keep doing it over and over and over again. I read a Deuteronomy that says, I think it's actually 24:5. I didn't know it. Did you know, like, the Israel practice when a man got married, they had a whole year off from work, from service. I think it was 24:5. It basically said they had a year of happiness as newlyweds, because it takes that time to learn each other. I wish I could go to my job and say, man, I just got married. I need a year off.
I need a year off.
With
Thank
pay.
you. With pay.
But what it's saying is that God because God
Values so
values
much,
that
so much.
and He wants us to get it right, and He wants us to, and you have to practice
And to pay attention.
and pay attention. You got to pay attention, and that's why they did that. And
That's
I thought
right.
that was amazing.
That is. I never read that, but I definitely I believe that because you want to you definitely want to pay attention, take that time to pay attention to your spouse. And sometimes when we take that initial leap of love, which get married and get engaged, we super excited. Oh, this is great. We just gonna ride off into the sunset. We take that leap of love, which is a leap of faith, and we don't realize that it takes that same faith and greater faith to stay married, to stay in love, to stay connected to your spouse. It takes that faith, and your faith has to grow, because when time and babies and jobs and disappointments and moving and houses and promotions and demotions and your mom-in-law and your daddy passing away and all these kinds of things that happen in your life, it's just like bam, 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 bam. It's crazy and it's brutal on that marriage.
Right.
You're trying to build your business, you're trying to build your ministry, you're trying to build whatever it is that you're trying to build. It is brutal on your marriage, and you must take time. You got to take a moment. You got to take time to regroup and reconnect. I don't care how many babies you have, because guess what? Your baby's going to one day be 14 years old, and they're not going to study nothing you doing.
Definitely.
They're not going to care about anything you're doing.
Definitely.
And the best thing you can do for your children, the best thing that you can do for your kid is to be an example of a loving couple, be an example of a loving marriage, and be a platform for them. Because if you're broken, then their platform is broken.
Right.
So they're standing on one foot trying to hobble, trying to, because they going between mom and daddy's house, or between mom, and they all, and stuff at home is all messed up. Come on, somebody. Right. You have got to be that stable platform, that stable foundation, so that they can be bigger and higher and better and more greater than what you are.
Definitely. Like I said, tonight we're not going to be long. Mm-hmm. Hopefully, you're going to be strong. But if you are a woman and your spouse, your husband is home, go grab him now for this next topic.
Absolutely.
We're going to talk about that. We're going to hold our breath, wait 30 seconds, and have you get them. Because what happens is that one thing that men, I'm going to share this with you. How do you increase, or how do you get the intimacy that you desire from your wife? How do you get that when something has been damaged, something has been broken, or nothing is wrong? You just had an extremely long week, day, month, or whatever. A lot of times men don't know how to get the intimacy that they desire from their own wives. So go get them, go pull them on, because what I'm going to tell you is something that we've shared, something that I've learned, and that I want to share with men, is, and I like to say is that in intimacy,
it's real.
In intimacy, you're not finished, men, when you think you're finished.
Yeah. When you get to the goal line, we have to make this plain.
We're going to make this plain tonight.
Yes, you're not done in intimacy.
Or you're not, you go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, sir, married man, when you finish, you're not finished.
You're not finished.
You know what I'm saying? When you get to touchdown, you still got to go.
What do you mean like that? Listen, how many of you have driven a diesel car? And a diesel car will sometimes, when you turn the key off, that car will keep on going.
That's right. So your wife is like a diesel engine.
Keep on knocking. Your wife is like a diesel engine. When you turn that key off, that car keeps on running, even though that key is out. And a lot of time, men, in intimacy is not the act of physical sex that what draws your wife to her intimate pleasure. Is holding her and touching her until she is completely settled. Mm-hmm. You don't get out that running car with that key out that ignition till that car stops.
That's right.
Right? And then you can close the door and get on out. And that's what we talk about, being finished when you think you're finished, or you're not finished when you think you're finished. In intimacy, it comes to a point that even no matter how long your day has been or what you've gone through, when you are trying to sow that intimacy, get that togetherness, you got to, hold her, you got to touch her, because she's that diesel engine. So after the fireworks, don't just roll over and start snoring.
Exactly. Right. When you take the key out the ignition,
right.
Don't just. Right. But ladies, I'm gonna insert this in here for you. while the key is in the ignition, you better take it for a ride.
Yes.
Take this
Yes.
thing for the ride, because that's what they need.
Right.
That's what he needs. He's not all gonna be all emotional. You can, throw the I love yous in there and all that stuff. And I know we being just plain tonight, but we can't help you any other way.
Right.
So and especially when you've been in marriage for a minute, when you've been married for a minute,
Right.
it's easy to do when you've been married for 1 year, 2 year, 3 years. But when you got, like I said, kids and life and stuff
7
and
to
terrible
double
stuff that's
digits,
that's happened, and just your jobs, you get 7, 8, 9, 10 years into that thing, you have got to make sure that you solid and connected. So when you're in that connected moment, when you're in that that part, you want to make sure, ladies, that you are giving it. You're not all tired and kind of half not into it, because that's a dud.
Right.
They not interested in that. You got to be the queen of the mountaintop.
That's right.
During that moment. And then after that, men, then you have to give us what we need.
Right. So your intimacy goal as a man, whether you've been married a day or 1,000 days, is to make her feel secure, safe, and loved.
Yeah.
Those 3 things, because that's what intimacy is for a woman. And if you can make her feel those things, then that makes her bring out all the things that you desire, that you want in your intimacy. But the only way that you really can do those 3 things is to show tenderness, it's through touching, and it's through conversation. Yeah. If you can master those 3 things, then it doesn't matter if the other parts, they come together like God intended it. Right. But those are things, when we talked about practice and patience, that you have to work on. So, I guess for men, our goals would be making you feel secure, making you feel safe, and making you feel loved. What do you think a woman's goal is for a man in intimacy?
Well, again,
I like what you said.
Yeah, absolutely. Basically, what I said before, to make him feel desired, make him feel appreciated, make him feel, secure in his manhood, and that his contribution as far as in his manhood and what he's doing in that relationship is sufficient. Because a man sometimes struggles, and I'm just going to throw it out, especially black men, they struggle with being enough in the world. You got to make sure that he feels like he's 100% enough at home. Right. And and that he's worth that effort. He's worth you doing a back bend. He's worth you looking up something on the Google and try to see how, okay, I'm gonna try this, I'm gonna figure it out. I don't know if this is quite how it's supposed to go, but you know what I'm saying, whatever it is, he's worth you trying that. He's worth you making that effort, and he's worth you ministering to him and loving him in that way and building him up in that way.
Right. And we've been talking about how to be a good shepherd. Yeah. Basically for the men, how to lead in your relationships, how to lead in your marriage, and also for your wife, how to lead not sort of from behind, and what we're talking about there. But I challenge you that if you are having issues in your marriage, or that if you're just trying to get better, like we said, practice and patience, but also think about your journey. When we talked about marriage, it's a lifelong journey, but it's also still a race to the cross. A good shepherd is the same thing that a husband will do. Yeah. A good shepherd is going to protect. I saw, actually, we have this story. It was about when I was a kid, about a goat that came across and butted me in the stomach, and I ended up fighting the goat at camp. But I don't know if you've ever seen sheep. Sheep are like weird. They're ugly, sort of. They're really temperamental. They wander off and stuff.
Yeah,
and so when you look at the analogy of what God, how he looks at us as sheep, and how he shepherds us, how he loves us. Because I even saw, I don't know, like one time sheep will run off of a cliff. If one sheep goes off the cliff, the other sheep will follow. Yes. They're like that. And so that's why you need a shepherd. A shepherd keeps the flock together. It protects them. It does all that. And that's why God uses that analogy for a man to be a shepherd, because there should be a joy in caring for your wife. There should be. If you are not up to that task and having a joy, then you need to reevaluate what's important. But just as that joy should come from being a shepherding and caring for your wife should understand that you will fail often. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times we expect our husband to do certain things but not make mistakes. And then when we make mistakes, there's no grace from the wife
Yes.
to say,
Gotta
hey,
have that grace.
there's no, to say, hey, go on. So that's one. You have to have joy for caring, and there has to be grace for mistakes. Would you agree?
Absolutely. 100%. You have to, ladies, you know, if your husband is not perfect in certain areas, you got to show him, you got to cut him some slack. You got to show him, you know, some grace to grow in that area. And, you know, and be, you know, not, you don't nag them into what it is you want them to do. Oh my God, you need to really handle your money better because I can't live like this. This is ridiculous because my phone been cut off 5 times. Yeah. You know, you can't have that kind of temperament. You got to give him grace and be like, honey, well, you know, either if you're better with money, be like, well, honey, maybe I should take care of this part. And then that way, you know, you take care of this part or whatever, you know, we put our money together and we just, you know, I still just make sure, cause I can remember stuff like that. Cause I know you're super busy, you know, and then I can remember it just on a dime, you know, I can just remember how to do that. You know what I'm saying? Gently say, make suggestions or either, you know, if he missed it a few times, you'd be like, honey, okay, well, we got to figure out, you know, how we're going to make sure, maybe we'll put some reminders in the phone for you to, you know, make sure we take care of stuff like that. You know, cause you're super busy. Right, you're that guy, you that deal. So I know you got a lot of stuff going on. So it's not your fault. You know what I'm saying?
Hey, you've said that to me before.
I have.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, so that's okay. There you go. So, right. And that's what we're talking about. So men, you have to have the joy of caring for your wife.
Yeah.
And then women, you have to have grace when that man makes a mistake, which he will.
Yeah.
The second part of that is that men, you have to have the responsibility of protecting her. You have to be the protector for your family. If she does not feel safe, then your wife is probably going to act crazy. And if you wonder why she is on your head, it's because you have not made her feel protected. Women, you have to understand that sometimes men, like my wife said, get distracted, especially black men, because of what sometimes they may deal with in the outside environment. I don't care if you are the executive CEO of a Fortune 500 company or you out there hustling on the streets.
That's right.
You know, that grind is real for us men. And so you have to have another, I guess, a grace to know that sometimes there is a distraction in protection. Right?
Absolutely.
Right. So, and, you know, and then you men, thirdly, you have to be committed 100% to loving her. And women, you have to understand that there may be times that you don't feel the love that you want from us. And when you don't feel that, how do you get us to get that back to you?
Well, you talked last week that you show what you want to get back. Basically, you sow what you want to see. So you sow and you give love, you give kindness, you give tenderness. And then, ladies, it's okay to ask. Sometimes you're like, hey, you know, and sometimes when you do ask, sometimes men still don't, you know, they don't get it and they don't do it. But you reap what you sow.
Right.
And so if you continue to show love, you should continue to show kindness, continue to show affection and tenderness, you know, and pray. Those things will come back to you. And again, you have to say, hey, you know, I need that from you. And I expect that from you. And if he's honoring you and learning to honor you, it's a process. But if he's learning to honor you, then he'll be like, yeah, I do. Because again, in nothing that we say, if you don't practice it, it's all great in theory. It's just the theory if you don't practice it. But if you practice it and you're being kind, you're being tender, you are looking into your spouse's eyes, you're looking at them, you engage in having that conversation, then, you know, that definitely, you know, is the end game.
Definitely. That's it for this evening. We appreciate you guys tuning in. We love you guys. We appreciate your support.
Yeah.
Hey, we got one of our friends joining us from Japan, so that means you are probably just waking up.
Yeah.
Bless you, my sister. Yeah. You know, a lot of times for men to be a good shepherd, you have to have the joy for caring for your wife. You have to have the responsibility of protecting her. You have to be committed to loving her. And then women, remember, and men, in times when you fail, because you are going to fail. It's all practice. Yes. This is something that you have to learn over and over. But admit your failures in spite of your good intentions. So one thing that was hard for me was to admit when I'm wrong. I still deal with that, you know, because sometimes it's not that I don't love my wife, but it's still like a sign of weakness sometimes. You think to be like, oh, I'm wrong, or I didn't do this right. I messed up. I forgot to pay this bill. But, you know, when you admit your failure, and one thing my wife is good at is that when I admit what I've done wrong, she's quickly and willing to forgive and then move forward. And I think, not speaking for you, but that when I admit those failures, you've our TV just kicked on, but we're wrapping up. But when you have times when you admit your failures, your wife is able to move forward, but I think she will also appreciate you for it.
Yes.
And I think that's one thing that helps when you're practicing, you know. So, men, hopefully you guys were able to join and watch this together with your spouse. If not, we're tuning off, we're done.
Yeah,
but if
you
not,
can
go back and watch
listen,
this,
yeah.
you know, and then share this with your family, your friends, and tell everybody, you know, watch us on Monday nights for 11:60 seconds.
Yeah.
So we hope that it helps somebody. Continue to send us your DMs telling us what you want to talk about. Appreciate you.
Absolutely. And love your spouse today. Show your spouse some love today. Grab them by the hand, look them in the face. You might have already done it, but do it again, because you can't do it too much. And let them know how much you love them. Let them know how much God loves them. And, you know, it'll just make everything better. And even if they have been acting a fool all day, because sometimes they act a fool, sometimes we know how it is. Your tenderness and your love can change the temperament of what is happening in your relationship.
Definitely. So we'll see you next Monday at 9 o'clock Eastern Time for Love in 60 Seconds.
All right.
God
Good
bless.
night.